So back in March, I developed hyperfixation. This didn't really surprise me because I tend to go down rabbit holes. My last one was Disney parks related content on YouTube, and this basically turned me into a full-blown Disney adult. So when, leading up to the Dune 2 release, I went down a hyperfixation hole, I didn't really know where it would lead me. I could tell you the origin of the name Muad'Dib. I could talk to you all about the interplanetary conflict going on in this particular series, and yet I'd never actually read the book or watched any of the movies. Now, obviously, my first order of business was to watch the movies, because why would I whip out this bad boy when I could just watch with my own two eyes? But it got me thinking, why have I never been interested in Dune before? Is it just Timothée Chalamet? And also, why do I not care about science fiction at all before this point? Why have I never really been interested in this genre? Is it because I was raised in a generation of girls that were told that girls are better at English language arts, boys are better at math and science? Or is it because space is inherently unsexy? So many thoughts, so many questions swirling in my mind. In this video, we're gonna find out. I'm taking the hyperfixation deep. I crowdsourced answers about science fiction from women on my Instagram. I rounded up books to read and movies to watch, and I'm gonna figure out if girls, in particular this girl, can like science fiction. Let's jump back in time to when I watched the first Dune movie and start out on our adventure.
Picking food out of my teeth.
Well, I don't need you to talk, so perfect. Because this is about if girls can like science fiction. We watched Dune 1 last night in the comfort of our own home, which I don't think was probably like the way to enjoy the movie, but I just feel like if you're gonna put the Timothy in front of me, that sweet, sweet Victorian orphan, I feel like you're doing it for the girls and the gays. I mean, how could it not be for girls? I think I liked it. I mean, I think maybe part of it was because I watched a bunch of YouTube videos that like got me interested in watching Dune in the first place, but I understood it. It was less challenging to understand than I thought it would be. I just feel like I've always heard that Dune is something that is super cerebral and like you're in people's heads. And obviously like the movie doesn't do that. Like it makes the choice not to do that. But I just thought it was going to be like so much lore, so much confusion, so many words I didn't understand. But there really wasn't that much of it. I think this is like a very accessible science fiction movie, to be honest.
Well, it's also, in my opinion, a very accessible adaptation of Dune specifically.
Yeah.
Like, book is like 80% internal dialogue.
I think they did a really good job, like, translating the book to... I mean, I didn't read the fucking book yet. We're gonna get there. I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. I think it doesn't really work that great as a standalone movie, and I could understand how people would be, like, disappointed if they didn't understand Dune, or, like, didn't know much going into it, and this was, like, the movie, and they were like, are we getting a sequel? I think at the time, there was, like, a question of whether this would get a sequel, and in which case, I don't think it, like, works that great as just a standalone movie. Like, it was fine, but I also just didn't know where the end point of the movie was going to be, because, like, the big kind of battle, I guess you could say, in this movie, it doesn't happen midway through, but kind of, and so after that, you're just like, wait, why are we still going? Like, when is this gonna end? And not because it wasn't enjoyable or felt like a long movie, but just because plot-wise, it was just a little bit, it was interesting. Now, is it lacking in some of the characteristics that I enjoy? Yes.
Which is?
Romance, kissing.
Yeah, there isn't a whole lot of that, like, period in the series.
Here's the thing. This is all about me, right? Like, I know I'm framing this video as, can girls like science fiction? But I think the bigger question is really, do I like science fiction?
And you're not like other girls.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, like, I'm very much like other girls in that I like to ship people. I like romance. Even if it's, like, not overt, I want to be able to, like, have a little fun with that. I think that's exciting. That's also kind of why I'm more interested, I think, in, like, Star Wars. Because I know that there's, like, ships in basically every one of the, like, trilogies, so that
somewhere
does
there
appeal.
shouldn't be.
Well, that's the whole point of ships. That's it's fun. It can be subversive. It can be weird.
With your sibling.
Okay. All right, fear might be the mind killer, but this book might just be a curiosity killer. I'm DNFing Dune. I watched both of the movies back to back. I thought they were pretty incredible. Now that I know so much about Dune, again, from going down my internet rabbit hole and watching the movies, I can say that there are fascinating concepts explored in this book. The execution of the writing, however, was not it for me, fam. And I think I'm gonna struggle to define every single thing about this book that did not work to me, but I'm gonna do my damn best to do so. Okay, first up, I don't give a fuck that this bitch's head is oval shaped. I simply do not. I do not care. So many times I'm told that Lady Jessica has an oval shaped face. Pretty eyes. So many times. I don't give a fuck. I do not give a fuck about Lady Jessica's oval head. I care about the interplanetary conflicts, okay? And the Harkonnens and the cool stuff here. I think what I'm finding is that Denis Villeneuve's ability to take a story like this and turn it into something that is visually interesting and cutting the fluff, it's fucking impressive. It's genuinely very impressive. And obviously a lot of people have failed in the past to make Dune into a movie. Yeah, hats off to him for doing that. I think it's interesting going into this as someone who knows so much too, because when I was talking to Hayden about his experience reading Dune, he read Dune before he watched the movies, he was talking so much about how he didn't understand the things that were going on, didn't understand a lot of the words that were in here, and he wasn't sure if they were just like words in a different language or if they were just made up words. And I have to say, going into this, it read very quickly to me. I didn't have any issues picking up on the language usage or the relationships or really anything. Nothing about this book confused me. I read, I should say for the record, about 150 pages of this before deciding it just simply was not for me. I actually wasn't confused. And I think it's interesting, again, seeing Hayden's reaction to it and seeing replies on threads. I posted that I was going to not finish this book, and a lot of people were chiming in with, I totally understand because it's confusing or complicated. And I don't feel that way. I just simply feel that this is not a very well told story. The writing of this is just so painfully dry, and it's crazy to me how emotion is conveyed on a screen, in this case so much better than it is conveyed in a book. You're actually feeling for the characters and what they're going through. If I had read this first, I don't think I would really understand Paul's character. Like, there definitely are signs of his defiance and signs of his actual character and, you know, the core of him, but for the most part I feel like we're just kind of trudging along to get to a point, and the author is writing this book just to prove a point. He created this world just to prove a point. And I guess that is kind of the case if you ask him what Dune is about or ask him what he was trying to prove here or like the themes and the messaging. It's strong. The anti-messianic like stuff that he's trying to say, like I get it, okay? But the way in which he does it is just not the kind of book that I tend to like, right? I like a book that is very character driven. It's interesting because this book is very internal. It is very like in people's heads. There's not a ton of dialogue that happens, but it's still not enough to really, again, like show me who these people are and why I should give a shit about them, you know, beyond just, oh, this is interesting, I want to see what happens next. So it's frustrating because as I was reading, you know, I was reading quickly, I was getting into it, and then I got to a point where I was just like, why do I care about any of these things? Like the things that I'm getting more detail about, like I guess Paul's relationship with Duncan Idaho and God, what's that other man's name? Gurney Hallett. I don't really care about Paul's training, to be honest, and I guess again you could say, well, it's necessary. Yeah, it's necessary, but like it's not fun, it's not interesting, I don't really give a shit about it. I feel like a failure in some ways for deciding that the book is just not for me, but I feel like I went into it with the best of my ability and the best of knowledge. You know, I'm not quitting because I thought this was too hard to get into or too complicated. And I really genuinely thought that would be the case. I thought like, I'm just too dumb to understand Dune. I'm not. I just don't like the way this book's told. I don't like the writing. It's too dry, and I feel okay about that. In the words of one of my Instagram friends, I like Dune because Timothée Chalamet. I have to concur there. You are a girl and you're someone who likes to ship things and you like complex interplanetary disputes. I think the movie is a fun little romp. And I think that if you are someone who wants to dive deep into the world, I think obviously the book has merit for sure. I like the ideas. I like how rich the world is. I just wish that the book itself had been more fun to read. So is this answering the question for me as to whether or not girls can like science fiction? I don't know. I think I'm at a bit of a draw right now because again, movies, excellent. Book, not my favorite. But I'm feeling bolstered in my intelligence, which is certainly nice because sometimes I do get intimidated by science fiction and fantasy because I'm like, I don't really want to like deter my thinking cap on too much when I'm reading a book. I just want to like have some fun. And this book I actually didn't feel like I had to do that too much. So feeling smart, feeling accomplished, and feeling confident in this DNF. So what I think the true test will be is Star Wars. Tonight is the night. I'm finally popping my Star Wars cherry. I hate that, actually. I take that back. I have vague pop culture knowledge of Star Wars, but I've never seen a Star Wars movie.
I'm like actually kind of shocked by that.
I am too, because my parents dressed me up as Queen Amidala Halloween when I was a kid. Full face paint, like red dress, robe, outfit.
Crazy.
Never seen the movies though. Don't know shit about them. The only thing that I do know is that like the Empire, like there's bad guys. There's like the other people, like
the rebels.
Yeah, those people. I know that there's some like incest in the first few movies, so I'm gonna be curious to see if we get that in the first one. Here's the watching order. Only watching the first movie in every trilogy on my channel. I may, however, watch all of the movies at some point and put that on Patreon, and I'll let you know when that happens. I want to see if these are good because, as you may have noticed, as I am doing these books and these movies, I am including little snippets of why girls like science fiction, and the resounding thing that I got was that a lot of girls started enjoying science fiction because their fathers specifically showed them Star Wars. And I thought that was really sweet. As someone who is close with my father, he's not the biggest Star Wars fan, but I think he was probably the reason why I was dressed as Queen Amidala for a Halloween costume. I also had like a t-shirt, I think, with her
That's
on
like
it.
so interesting. Yep. I just really cannot see that from either of your parents.
Oh, my dad's a huge dork, so I'm not really surprised. I'm gonna try it out. And the watch order, by the way, I'm gonna do the first movie first, and I'm gonna go to the...
What do you mean by the first movie? You mean episode 4?
Sure, yeah,
Okay.
the first one that came out ever. Okay. And then we're gonna go back to the ones with Hayden Christensen, because he's fucking sexy. I'm gonna go to the what's his name? Adam Driver one afterwards.
Unfortunately, I share a name with the man who ruined that trilogy, but...
Hayden Christensen's fucking fine, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, but it's so bad.
I don't think it was his fault. I think he was given bad material. I think sometimes you just have to be hot. That's half the battle.
All right.
And he
That's
got
fair.
there. I'm curious about the Adam Driver ones, because there's been a lot of Raylo fan fiction, most of which I've enjoyed. Not the actual fan fiction. I don't read fan fiction, but like published fan fictions, like the Ali Hazelwood books. So much of it at this point that I've probably read that I don't even know about. And good for me watching Star Wars. Okay, I'll come back after watching to give you my thoughts. All right, are we cool if I blaspheme for a second? Because what the fuck was this movie? What was this movie? I fully expected episode 4 to be something that was a little bit dated, a little bit nostalgic, not for me, but for other people. I knew that nostalgia clouded people's judgment of this series and these movies. I didn't expect to watch something so boring and just come out scratching my head. I don't get it. I do not understand the love for this movie. And I think maybe it proves to me that I need to finish the trilogy and really fully understand, I suppose, what is so great about these movies. But that being said, I think that a movie should stand alone on its own merit. I think that even if there are movies in a series, they need to be able to stand alone as enjoyable watching experiences. And maybe, you know, if you're watching the second or third movie in a trilogy without having watched the others, yeah, you're lacking context. I'm not arguing that, but I'm saying the first movie in a series should entice me to watch the rest. And frankly, this does not entice me to do anything except for give up on Star Wars altogether, frankly. I'm not going to, but wow. Let me try to define my discontent, shall I? We open up on a spaceship and we know that Leia is in trouble, right? She's coming into contact with Darth Vader. She's captured essentially, and she is in grave danger, okay? And the planet that she loves and is in charge of gets blown up really quickly, right? I think we're supposed to think that Darth Vader is this big bad guy and so scary, but immediately I don't care. Immediately I don't care. And the problem with this movie, and this problem continues to go on in the movie, I don't feel like I really need to get into the plot too much, because I think we've watched it if we want to watch it, and we haven't if we don't want to. It's a typical hero's journey with Luke Skywalker, you know, training to become a Jedi and like, you know, pilot at the end of this fucking movie and being like a hero. Anyway, that doesn't matter. That's not relevant. What's relevant, and the reason I really disliked this movie, and I don't understand the hype, is there is no emotional resonance in this movie. The dialogue is surprisingly lacking. There is a lot of action. There's not a lot of dialogue, and the dialogue that is there does not help to kind of round out and flesh out the story. Say what you want about the delight of the fucking scrolling text at the beginning of this movie, but we're thrown into something with very little context. We don't give a shit about Princess Leia. We don't really know who she is or why this should matter to us. And throughout the course of the story, you don't really care much about her or about her story. And again, it's especially bad because there's no fucking emotional resonance. And what do I mean by this, you might say? Again, Darth Vader blowing up an entire planet super quickly and Leia having basically no reaction. Okay, why am I supposed to care? We've got Luke's family being charred to a fucking crisp. And this is what sends him on his hero's journey, but within 5 seconds of him finding out his family's dead, he's like, maybe I will be a Jedi. You're not sad, we're not gonna cry, we're not gonna have like a little bit of time to think, to mourn a little bit. And I'm not saying we need hours and hours of screen time devoted to him weeping, but like just a second for us to give a shit. Never happens. Like that never happens in this movie. It's wild to me. And well, maybe it's the lady in me, the emotional lady in me. All of this is tongue in cheek, if that was not abundantly clear. I'm shocked, you know? And especially comparing this to something like Dune, there are so many moments of emotional resonance there, which is wild because there's kind of not a lot of that in the book, I would say. Like, there's not a lot of moments of like sitting with feelings and emotions, in my humble opinion. Whereas in the Dune movie, I felt for Paul. I felt for Paul, his father dying. I was sad when Leto died, even though I didn't really like his character. He was a little too stoic. I felt bad for him because the Harkonnens are so awful and he's in this terrible position. In this movie, there are bad things that happen, but none of it really lands because none of the characters seem to react to it. None of the characters seem to have really strong feelings towards each other. I mean, both Han and Luke have a crush on Leia that's about as deep as the emotions run. I could rant for hours. I could go through every single point of this movie and talk to you about why I'm just astounded. But I won't do that. do that to either of us. I just want to say that I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't think I get it from the nostalgia factor either, obviously, because I'm not a person of the 70s. I think I'll maybe have more of that reaction when I watch The Phantom Menace, because I'm a child of the 90s, and I feel like visually maybe it'll like look more 90s and be more fun. I don't know. I just don't get it. The only time when I was really like, hell yeah, let's do this, was the last part of the movie where Luke is in a fighter jet and is trying to like take down, is it the Death Star? I'm sorry to blaspheme. Hopefully the next two movies that I watch are gonna be better. A little scared because this is supposed to be like the best trilogy, but I'm prepared to be a contrarian and hate all of them, or to like the other ones more than this. But I think regardless, I need a palate cleanser.
You know, after all of this, after Dune, after Star Wars, I'm feeling a little bit sick of men. So I decided to pick up Annie Bot. I picked this book for 3 reasons. Number 1, I got an advanced listener copy from Libro FM, so free to me, love that. Have been looking for an excuse to read it. Number 2, I obviously wanted a new release, or a newer release, to talk about. I mean, Dune, she's old, let's be real. And number 3, this was the perfect choice for one of the reasons that y'all enjoy science fiction. By y'all, I mean my fellow ladies. I got obviously so many different responses from all of you, one of which was that you like to explore human concepts through non-human characters. This is perfect for that because we've got Bot, and additionally, I feel like I read a lot of responses saying that people really enjoyed science fiction books, but only when written by women. So I of course had to have a female author in this video. Now, I have to say, I am thoroughly enjoying this book, and if you look at the Goodreads reviews, most people seem to not enjoy it, and I'm wondering why that is. So this book's about 2 main characters. We've got Annie, who is a bot, and we've got Doug, who is her owner. A couple different modes, I guess, that these sexy lady bots can be in, and I assume there's probably other sorts of bots as well in this society. Not that we've really met any bots that are not, but there are different models, I guess, of lady bots, and you can like customize them to yourself or whatever. We know that Annie costs a pretty penny, and Doug uses her as sort of a way to get over his ex. She, in the mode that she's currently in, is kind of AI-ish. Like, she's got this sort of learning model where she starts to develop feelings and emotions, or at least in the way that a computer or like a robot can. But we get this book from her point of view, and it's so interesting the way that this plays with so many different concepts, because obviously we're in Annie's head and we're understanding how she is constantly trying to please this man, and how this is not just a robot experience, but instead a human one explored through the guise and through the lens of AI and robotics. I'm 30% in, and the plot of this book so far hasn't been very wild or all over the place. I mean, it's a very internal sort of book. Like, I'm more interested, I guess, in Annie's feelings about everything that's happening rather than like what's actually happening plot-wise, because not much is happening. Wow, how many times can a bitch say happening? She is learning how to please Doug. She's been with him for a while. We have a visitor for the first time. Comes, I think it's one of Doug's friends from like school or something. They've known each other a while, and when he comes in, he like basically remarks that Annie looks a lot like Doug's ex, which I don't think Annie knew ahead of time. You get to see, yeah, just how like Annie's programmed and how Annie works and how she interacts with the world. There's a situation where she is like asked to have sex by Doug's friend, which like leads to obviously complicated feelings, I guess, by Annie, and also like, what is her autonomy? Is she supposed to like listen to anybody? Is she supposed to listen to herself? You know, I'm not doing this book justice, but I also think that I'm only 30% in, and I don't really know in what direction this book is heading. Is it really just supposed to be like kind of mundane things are happening, and like the real like scary and or like thing you're supposed to ponder on is like inner feelings of Annie and like how she's growing, and also like questioning AI, that sort of thing, robotics? Like, is there going to be a twist? Is this going to be kind of thrilling? I will say, you do have a sense of like uneasiness the entire time you're reading. It is wild how, again, similar female experience the woman experience is, I guess, to what this sex robot basically is experiencing. I mean, she does other stuff with Doug besides just have sex with him, but this is definitely an interesting book, and it's one that I plugged in, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't expect much given that the Goodreads reviews are kind of middling for this. I think the average rating is like a 3.6 or something like that, and yet I just want to keep listening. I am genuinely concerned for Annie. I want her to have the best. Honestly, fuck Doug. He has shown some interesting behavior. Oh, and also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this plot point. There is a question, I guess, of whether Annie is like, I don't want to say the supreme extreme robot girl, but some of the people that do the tune-ups for Annie have realized like how advanced she is beyond like the learning of the other lady robots, and they're wondering if they can like copy her memory, like scrub all the really personal stuff that like relates to Doug, but that kind of memory into a bunch of other robots. Yeah, will Annie have say in this? Does she actually want this to happen? Is interesting. Oh, also, the people that are like tuning her up have asked her not to learn programming because she's like obviously learning a bunch of different stuff and is interested in a bunch of different like subjects. They're like, no, like focus on like yoga and massage, or like, I don't know, read books, but like don't learn programming because we don't want you to like be tempted to program yourself. It's a hard time accepting that. So I'm very intrigued by this. This is like genuinely interesting to me. So I am gonna get like 60% in and update you, and hopefully things continue to go well. Because if this is the kind of science fiction exists out there, like if there is stuff like this, I'm intrigued. I will say, you know, that is something that I have noticed in the science fiction, the few science fiction books that I have read, is that whenever science fiction does explore humanity and explore philosophy and these like themes in a different setting, I find it really interesting, like the parallels that can be drawn to our real life. And, you know, I obviously appreciate that about Dune, but execution was lacking for me. And that's okay. This execution I'm enjoying more, and I'm sure that's blasphemous, but I don't give a shit. I'm not always in the car, but today I am. Hayden is in Home Depot getting us some wood filler and caulk for a project we're doing over on the vlog channel. So I'm here to tell you about my 60% thoughts on Annie Bot. And let me just say, for the record, this shit's really brutal. Things have turned bleak. I don't really want to spoil the book because I have a feeling that I might be telling you that you should go and read this one. I will say is that Annie continues to gain sentience and humanity, and is starting to think for herself. Doug doesn't like this. Are we shocked? Are we surprised that a man doesn't like a woman who can think? I feel bad almost passively listening to this. I wouldn't even say passively. I'm an active listener. I'm actively listening to what's happening in this book. I feel bad for not fully engaging in what this book is trying to say. I know that it makes me feel uneasy. I know that the things that are happening, I'm not liking. I mean, the book's written well. I'm just saying, like, I wouldn't want these things to happen to me, and it does definitely raise questions. Like, I guess the one thing I have been thinking during this is what is humanity, what is sentience, and can that exist in an AI context? Like, can these things be gained? What is pain, right? Like, there's a scene where Annie is in quite a bit of physical pain, even though she can't technically feel the pain. She's been trained as to what pain feels like. Very interesting. I normally hate stories, I'm gonna be honest with you, about robots, and I don't think I would ever really willingly pick up a book about AI, but this one's kind of changing my mind. I'm kind of intrigued. You know what's actually funny? I read Murderbot, which is a highly acclaimed, like, little fucking novella series that everybody seems to just eat up. Didn't like it. Thought it was kind of bleh. This, I'm eating up. And, I think it's because it's a woman. Is Murderbot a woman? I don't know what Murderbot's gender is. I'd like this one, okay? Because it also deals with, you know, misogyny, gender, abuse, humanity. There's so much to explore here. It's fascinating. I get it. I'm starting to understand why y'all enjoy science fiction. Like, definitely enjoy that it's written by a woman. I can definitely tell. Like, again, the humanity and philosophy being explored here is fascinating to me. I'm really curious to see how this is gonna end. I just want my girl Annie to, like, have the life that she deserves and wants, away from this pig named Doug. Hello, party people. Guess what? I finished a book. And I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed a science fiction book.
Wait, what did you read?
It wasn't Leviathan Wakes. I finished Annie Bot, and I actually really enjoyed this. Is it because it was written by a woman? It might be. I wouldn't say this book ended differently than I expected, but I also just had no idea where the story was going to go. It definitely went in a direction that I enjoyed, and it was just honestly endlessly fascinating. I really like this concept. I wouldn't say that the story itself was really something that was like, wow, so many twists and turns. I've never seen anything like this before. And yet at the same time, I think that it explored these ideas of like misogyny and AI and robotics in like a way that I don't think I've seen done before. I'm sure I guess, oh God, what's that movie called? It's a little Stepford Wivesy, but like a little bit more 21st century. Yeah, I would recommend this if you are someone who is maybe on the fence about science fiction, especially since this one, it's not like it's a book where you're having to like really dive into a bunch of lore like with Dune. Not that that's a bad thing. In fact, that's one of the things I admire about Dune, to be honest, is how rich the world is, even if I think the writing is pretty shit. This book, I don't think the writing was like the most spectacular, but I really like the inner thoughts of Annie. And overall, I have, I would say, a renewed vigor for science fiction, which is perfect because we're about to watch, I believe, is it The Phantom Menace?
which is Star Wars #1. I'm really hoping that I have better experience this time around. Though I did Google and there's no Hayden Christensen in this one, so I'm a little disappointed in that.
Yeah.
Here's the thing.
He's a young blood.
I need like a hunky heartthrob in like a Star Wars movie for me to give a shit, and I'm not really getting that.
There's not in this one, I'll tell you that.
I'll be
right
honest,
now.
like Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, they didn't really do it for me. Episode whatever the fuck we watched 4.
You don't think Liam Neeson's gonna do it for you?
It's gonna be Jar Jar Binks, I think.
What about Samuel?
Natalie Portman's in it, lest we forget, but she might not be. I think she might be young though, so maybe not. I don't know. I'm disappointed in the lack of hot hunks or fine ass ladies. Either way, I mean, I'll take both. I don't discriminate. I do discriminate against him though.
This one sucks.
We were trying to film this clip and we had to just sit here in silence while he in the letterbox. I'll report back actually immediately after finishing this movie. You better be ready. All right, besties, I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna say a lot of things that I don't think you're gonna like. I had 18 minutes of The Phantom Menace to watch last night. My Disney Plus just decided to give out on me and I couldn't finish it last night and I couldn't give you the update that I wanted to. The good news is that I did finish it this morning and I actually was feeling a little lazy, so instead of reading a book in between watching another Star Wars movie, I watched The Force Awakens today. The Star Wars movies just get better, and I know what you're gonna say, Chandler. How could you think that 4 is in any way worse than 1? And to that I say, I think that as the movies develop, and I think as cinema develops, movies just tend to get better over time. That's not to say every movie that's put out now is better than every movie that has been put out in the past, but especially for these George Lucas films, I have to say that I'm really noticing trend of reverse, I guess. Here's my issue, okay? I talked about it when I discussed the 4th episode with y'all. There's not enough time spent lingering in emotions and in impactful scenes for anything to truly land. When Luke's whole family fucking dies and he's like, you know what, I want to train to be a Jedi, there's no like separation of time between those two events occurring. It's literally within minutes of him finding out his family's dead, with him seeing the charred remains of people, he's like, you know what, I'm gonna be a Jedi. No time to think, whatever. And I'm sure you could explain that away. I'm sure some of you in the comments will, but absolutely astounding to me that this is supposed to be like the peak of Star Wars cinema. It's the original trilogy, and I just don't see it. Granted, everybody says the first movie is not as good as the other ones, whatever. Actually crazy watching this for the first time, having no nostalgia tied to the series, and then watching the other movies in the series, the ones that are outside of the original trilogy, and being like, wait, people don't like these? I don't understand. Phantom Menace, let me chat about that one with you first, and then I think it'll all come together, right? Phantom Menace. This one is interesting. Obviously, it takes place before the original trilogy. We've got Anakin Skywalker, who is a young Jedi who doesn't know that he has the Force within him, right? Like, he's very powerful. One of the Jedis, I honestly can't remember Liam Neeson's name in this movie. He is like, oh, he's got really strong Force within him, and we've got to train him up good. Ewan McGregor's kind of like, wait, but I'm your Jedi in training. I'm the young Padawan. What's going on? That's not exactly the plot of the movie. That's just like a main thread that I'm assuming will carry on into the other movies. The whole movie in general, I think we're given more context for and more world building for than we do with episode 4. So we've got Queen Amidala, and she is trying to make sure that trades keep happening with Naboo, I believe. There's some people who are trying to fuck her down, and she's trying to prevent this from happening and prevent her world from being taken over and everybody slaughtered. So, she's got a lot at stake there. And then we've got, the surrounding cast of characters who is coming out of the woodwork to kind of help her, and also to sort of like go on their own missions, I guess. Liam Neeson, Ewan McGregor, they come in, they try to help Queen Amidala, but there's Jar Jar Binks, who's deeply fucking irritating, which everybody pretty much universally agrees on, right? Some things I liked about this one. The action sequences are just so much better than in the 4th episode. I don't think that is like something you can deny. Hopefully in 5 and 6, those fight sequences get better, and like, I'm just kind of talking out of my ass here, but for that first movie that I watched, the fight sequences are fucking pathetic. Like, they're not fun to watch visually, and I think we've gotten so far past that in pretty much all other movies. It was made in the 70s, I get it, there probably weren't like choreographers necessarily, and if they were, not to be a dick, they were doing a bad job. Fight sequences, so much better in Phantom Menace. The character beats and the moments of emotion made a lot more sense. It's definitely not quite as impactful as, like, in my opinion, the characters in The Force Awakens, but you do have moments, especially with this like young child actor, where he's kind of doing a good job. And Hayden, before we watched this movie, was telling me that the child actor is going to be terrible and you're going to hate it, blah, blah, blah. I actually think he did a pretty good job. Like, is his acting supreme? No, but this kid's supposed to be 10, so I'm like actually kind of impressed. What was surprising to me is how shitty of an actress his mother was. It was like, Anakin, you're going to go and be in this race and potentially die. oh, that's so sad. This is your son. I feel like there should be more like dramatic tension and angst there, but there are, again, more emotional beats of this, and so I could understand why people could potentially like this one, and I don't understand why this one gets the hate that it gets. That being said, the special effects, pretty fucking terrible, kind of reminded me of a Spy Kids movie. No shade to Spy Kids, love Spy Kids. Also kind of liked this one a little bit better because that 90s sense of technology and modernity is something that I can relate to more, having like lived through that time period than, you know, the 70s kind of like exploration of what space would look like into the future. I think I actually have an attachment to this. Did I miss Hayden Christensen in this? Yes, I did. And I do kind of want to watch the other movies. I know. I don't know when I'm going to get around to them, but I'm probably going to watch all the Star Wars movies now. I can say that with a degree of certainty. Can we move on to the movie I want to talk about? The Force Awakens was fucking good. It was an actually good movie. Again, I am shocked at anyone who likes Star Wars and doesn't like this movie because it has everything. It's got emotional story beats. It's got the nostalgia of that first trilogy because you've got characters coming back from the original trilogy, fight sequences. You've got so much action. This is such an action-packed movie. And from the beginning, I just cared so much more. So the cast of characters, you've got Poe Dameron, who is this like fighter for the Resistance, who ends up connecting with this stormtrooper who is trying to defect, I guess, and kind of run away. He doesn't necessarily think he's going to join the Resistance. He's just like, I need to get the fuck out of here. And so him and Poe team up. They crash land on this planet. Poe is like missing in action. We don't really know what happens to him. We've got Finn, again, the stormtrooper who's defected, and he is in this sort of like chance encounter with Rey, who is a scavenger, I believe is what they call her. He finds her with BB-8 and he's like, oh shit, Poe had BB-8 and it has the location of where Luke Skywalker is, which is apparently important. They kind of come together, right? And they're like their little band of people hop on the Millennium Falcon to escape this planet that they've all crash landed onto, except for Rey, because like she lives on the planet. And then they find Harrison Ford's character, Han Solo, and Chewbacca, and then they team up. They do some shit. I'm doing a terrible job of describing this movie. Here's the thing. All of these movies are already out, and most people have already seen them. I feel like who want to see them, my explanation doesn't really matter. Here's what I enjoyed. I think this is a movie for the girls. I think this is a movie for the girls. Yes, it's very action-packed. Yes, it's very like a boy movie with all the fighting and all of the action scenes, but I think what makes this one land is the emotional beats. The storytelling is so much richer, and it's not like the scripts are really that different, I would say, from some of the other movies. It's not like they are these like richly complicated scripts, but you have moments of tension. At the very end of the movie, when you've got Luke and Rey on this like cliffside and she has the fucking, what do they call it, lightsaber, like flung out to him, like basically saying like, will you train me? They lock eyes, and that moment of tension, you see very little of that in the fourth episode. You see a little bit more of that in the first episode, and then in this one it's just like so much more emotional tension. And then scenes with Adam Driver's character, he delivered with the acting so good, so much scarier than Darth Vader. Okay, again, in the first movie, or I guess fourth episode, whatever, first movie, fourth episode, Darth Vader comes in. Talk about a not scary person. Like, he has Princess Leia under his control. Like, he has her kidnapped, basically. I'm not scared of him at all. His heavy breathing that's supposed to be terrifying, also not terrifying in this movie. Maybe it happens in the other ones. I'm sure it does. I know there's, like, the Luke, I am your father thing. But in this one, you actually see Kylo Ren murder an entire village, and you're like, okay, this man's fucking scary. He doesn't just, like, blow up a planet, and you're like, oh, okay. That's another thing. In that first movie, Darth Vader just blows up a whole fucking planet, Leia's planet, where all of her people are. And she's like, no, don't do it. Okay, where's the emotional resonance? This movie has emotional resonance. It was good, it was fun, it was entertaining, and I want to know what happens next. Yes, part of that is because of Reylo shipping. Yeah, okay, part of it is, but also so much happened. There were deaths that felt impactful. There were scenes that I was like, wow, this is beautiful to watch, and also like is making an impact on the storyline. Let me just say for the record, I might like Star Wars. I might like Star Wars, and I didn't think that would be the case, but I might like Star Wars, okay? If you would like to see my thoughts and feelings on the rest of these movies, at the end of the month, I believe I will do a little video on my Patreon, on my $10 tier. If you want to go sign up for a month and watch me talk about the rest of these, you certainly can. You can do that. We just end this segment of the video of the Star Wars sort of universe, thoughts and feelings by saying I can understand how these stories connect with so many different audiences and so many different generations. I think this idea of like good versus evil is something that we can all relate to, and also, you know, found family I think is something that's really special and that is a thing in all of the movies. And who doesn't like a good action scene and a little bit of love and romance? Have I seen any love and romance in any of these movies? Because I've only watched the first one, no. But I do know that that's a thing that happens in all of the trilogies. That's part of the reason I kind of want to watch all of them. You know, I kind of understand Star Wars. I think even for someone who is not super into science fiction, I think watching these is kind of a fun time, and also just understanding culturally what so many people are obsessed with, I think is pretty fun. So I am glad actually that I watched all of these. Between this and Dune, I much prefer Dune. Dune is just like better done in my opinion, but I think that I'd definitely be more inclined and interested to watch science fiction in the future. The jury's still out on whether or not I really care that much about reading it, but we have one more book to go. Let's go ahead and listen to Leviathan Wakes. Now, before I tell you my thoughts and feelings on The Expanse, I'm going to use the words of my fellow woman. Sometimes my ego needs decreasing, so I read science fiction books to feel stupid. And also, give me the pew-pew, but on a spaceship. I enjoy shoot-'em-up movies, but in space. Where to begin? Leviathan Wakes. The Expanse, Book 1. This has been turned into a program on Sci-Fi, which I may or may not watch at some point. I've heard the show is pretty good, and I'm picking this up because my husband really enjoyed this book, and obviously a lot of other people do as well. It's funny, when I talked about reading this book, I had not one but two replies in my DMs also saying, oh, I read that book because my husband enjoyed it, so maybe this is just the husband book. If you have a husband, he's probably read this book. This one is remarkably different than Dune and Star Wars and Anibot. Obviously, it's most akin to Star Wars, given that this one is set in space. Basically, this book follows two main characters. You've got Holden and Miller. That's their last names. Holden is a miner, an ice miner or whatever. He's like on a ship. I think he's like second mate. I don't know. He's on the ship, and they come across another ship that seems to have been abandoned. So him and a few other people on his ship go and check it out. And while they're there, taking, like a little minor ship to get to this big ship that's been abandoned, ship that they came from blows the fuck up. We think some shady shit is afoot. We don't really know what, and I'll be honest, as a reader, I'm feeling pretty stupid at this point. I have no idea what the fuck's going on. I'm trying to follow the book. I'm trying to follow, the lore, the fact that some people live in the belt, people live on Mars, some people live on Earth, and everybody built a little differently depending on the gravity of kind of where they're at. So some people are really long and lanky, some people are really short and stout. You can kind of tell where someone's from because of like how they're built, which I think is kind of a fun little tidbit thrown in. Love the lore. So we've got Holden, he's doing shit, and I think what's most striking about the beginning part of this book is that we've got this guy who is operating on instincts alone and is kind of a dumbass. He finds, or his crew finds, maybe like a battery or something on this abandoned ship. It looks like, the crew of the ship has been taken over, and they find a battery and they're like, oh wait, this is a Martian battery. Let me broadcast over the air to every single person just like in our galaxy. We think the Martians are like fucking shit up, starting a war. So this one guy's broadcast starts a war. Really cute, really fun. After that, things get a little interesting for him in that he is going to a bunch of different places and is doing a bunch of different things, and is kind of just piddling around for a little bit in the book. He's not really sure where he's supposed to be, what's going on, what's afoot here. I'll be honest, his plotline at the beginning kind of confused me. Nothing confused me quite as much as Miller's plotline. Miller is a detective / cop on I don't know what planet or what moon, to be honest, and he is tasked with finding a girl, a really wealthy girl who's gone missing. I think she's like in adulthood, but parents are looking for her. They haven't heard from her in a while. They don't know where she is. I don't know what exactly her job is, but I know that she like flies ships or whatever. Eventually Miller and Holden's paths cross. I will say all of the shit with Miller before his path crosses with Holden, didn't understand a lot of it and or didn't really care. All you really need to know about him is he's like a sad drunk guy who is kind of bad at his job. That's all you really need to know about him, and he does get fired from his job, so makes sense. What to say, really? Kind of like this book. For a long time I didn't know how I felt, okay? I normally like to give you a 30%, 60%, and 100% update on a book, but with this book, when I was 30% in, I still didn't really understand what was happening with the plot line, and now that I am further into the book, I understand what's happening in the plot line, and I feel like I have more well-developed thoughts and feelings. Also, I didn't really tell you what like the main thing that's happening is. Basically, in Miller's quest to find this girl, he starts discovering stuff about some like interplanetary conflict perhaps, and or some sort of contagion. I don't want to get into the details, don't want to spoil it for you. And Holden becomes involved in this because of a quest he's supposed to be going on to like this, again, I don't know if it's a planet or a moon, whatever. I don't know where things are going, and I think that is another one of y'all's quotes in here. I usually like to escape reality, and I don't like being able to guess a book's ending. I have no idea where this book is going. Honestly, I didn't really know what to expect in terms of what the like central conflict and theme would be. And again, it takes this book kind of a while to get there in terms of like, there's a few different things. You're like, okay, this guy is trying to find this girl. Like, he's a detective. Okay. This other guy, he's like finding abandoned ships, but like, where is this going? And now I know where it's going, and I think it's kind of interesting, I guess. I think what's making this one maybe a little bit more remarkable than some of the other science fiction I've read in the past is the characterization. Now, do I really like
or love Holden and Miller? No. Do I really give a fuck what happens to them? No. However, I can really appreciate that this author-writing duo, this is not written by one man, but two, put some effort into the interpersonal relationships and the humanity of each person. I find, like, especially when reading something like Dune, if we're going to compare it directly to Dune, which seems a little unfair, the way that this is written, I actually am understanding these characters' motivations, some of their character flaws pretty quickly, and I think it's pretty easy to see the character flaws in the characters in Dune. However, it's more that their character flaws are on, like, full display, or they're unintentionally written by the author, whereas in this book, I don't know, there's just more subtlety and nuance in how the characters are written, and I am appreciating the interpersonal kind of relationships, and also that the female characters in this book don't seem to be written in a way where I'm like, yeah, man wrote this person. I mean, I guess you could kind of say that a little bit for, is it Naomi, who is the love interest for Holden? Kind of say that, but not really, because she's kind of like a boss bitch. She's like, leave me alone. So A+ for the characterization. The plotline, I think I've mentioned it a time or two already in talking to you, but I am intrigued now. I really wish there had been a faster ramp up to the information that we got. And obviously the men in this book, like, they get their introductions and we get a lot of backstory on them and their, you know, interpersonal relationships with people around them, blah, blah, blah. I don't think we needed that much time to do it, is all I'm trying to say. Thoughts right now at the 60% mark are that I want to know what happens next. I want to see how some of these interpersonal relationships play out, mostly between Holden and Naomi, and then also Holden and Miller. Like, I'm curious to see. They've been through some hard shit together. They got radiation poisoning together, so, like, you know, whoever bleeds out of their ass together stays together. For a book written by a couple of men, I'll begrudgingly admit that this one's a pretty good one. I finished it. I finished Leviathan Wakes, and I actually kind of enjoyed this. I thought it was pretty great. I think for the kind of story that this was, I think it did an incredible job at executing it. Was it a bit long for my liking? Yes. Did I love the characters? No. Was this the perfect book for me? Also no. But I really did appreciate this for what it was, and I think if you're a Star Wars fan, I think you might like this. If you like the concept of Star Wars, but you want perhaps a little bit more backstory and well-roundedness and depth, I think you might enjoy this. So I already kind of told you what the story is about, and it's, like, challenging to talk about because so many things happened since I last spoke to you, and I also don't want to spoil this book if you are curious about reading it. But the book proceeds in a direction I was not expecting. There is this sort of, like, contagion that occurs. There is this sort of, like, bug virus thing that infects a certain portion of the population, and what happens from there, I wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting it to play into the interplanetary conflict in the way that it did. I wasn't expecting the characters' actions that they took. And yeah, overall, I just really was not expecting the way that the kind of, like, penultimate, like the very end scene sort of played out. So what to say about my actual feelings about it? I am just genuinely impressed with this book. I wasn't not expecting to be, because my husband does have fairly good taste, even if our tastes don't always converge. I can appreciate the things that he tends to enjoy, and I know that a lot of people enjoy this book. I think that one of my delightful Instagram followers said it really well. I like science fiction because it gives the escapism of high fantasy without the woman-hating violence. And I really would say that this feels like a high fantasy novel in the sense that you are immersed deep into this world. There are complicated relationships between people that come from different parts of the solar system. There is so much at stake here. And yet, yeah, there's not a lot of, like, woman-hating violence. You're not like, oh, someone's going to be assaulted at any time. It's really well done. Actually, again, I appreciated that the female characters didn't feel too much like they were written by men, which was real nice. I really appreciated that. Did it also spark my deepest anxieties? Like one of my followers said. Yes, maybe in a sense. There were a lot of things that this book touched on that actually did sort of terrify me, but I understand why this is a beloved science fiction book, why it's won so many awards, and I'd be curious to watch the show. Frankly, do I think I'm going to continue on with the book series? Probably not, knowing myself. I don't know if this was, like, enough to fully get me into science fiction, but let me do a wrap up of my thoughts on whether girls can like science fiction. The answer is yes. Of course they can, because it's a stupid fucking question. Can this girl like science fiction? The answer to that is I really do prefer it on the big screen. Now, was the first Star Wars movie kind of shit to me? Absolutely it was, but I really have come to enjoy that world. I want to watch the rest of the movies. I really fucking loved the Dune movies, even though the book kind of sucked. Leviathan Wakes, while great, I think I would have preferred in a visual medium, to be honest, more than the book, just because with space, I feel like it's kind of hard to imagine, you know, it's not things that I see every day. Whereas, like, I feel like fantasy, you know, you're describing rivers and lakes and mountains and shit. I can picture that. It's harder for me to picture space and, like, spacecraft. So seeing it visually, I think, is much more impressive. And I also think that I really enjoy science fiction when it's written by women. I think I enjoy science fiction when it is not set in space, necessarily. I think that
that is also something that I'm coming to find. And I guess I've never really made the distinction in my head that there is science fiction that's not set in space. I mean, obviously science fiction doesn't mean space genre, but typically that's what I think of. I think I'm more inclined, again, to watch science fiction set in space and to read science fiction when it is not set in space. But overall, I had such a fun time doing this. I feel like it's kind of expanded my mind and expanded my genre preference. Like, I feel like I wouldn't hesitate to pick up a science fiction if someone recommended one to me in the future. Overall, this was like such a fun video, such a fun experiment to do. Like I said, I'm going to be doing that Star Wars kind of like watching all of the movies over on Patreon, and I'll do a community post to let you know when I do that. And also, this is just the beginning, my friends. I am going to be doing a series like this here on my channel where I explore genres that I previously think that I have not enjoyed in the past. Science fiction, I didn't think I liked, and that's not actually true. The next one, I believe, is going to be me exploring historical fiction, which should be interesting because I feel like I have some deep-seated anger issues when it comes to historical fiction, but I'm gonna do a similar video on historical fiction in the future, probably next month. But thanks for watching this one. I love you all so much, and I'll see you next time.